What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 Innovation Award given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And once a month, I host online conversations for fathers and dads that are co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. And as always, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. We're broadcasting live on October 25th. It's the last Sunday in October, and I'm here in Toronto, and it feels like the last Sunday in October, feels like the last Sunday in November. It is cold, cold, cold. Like Monday, was it Friday? The temperature was nice. I was out in shorts. Today, wow, I made a mistake not covering the dome when I went outside here, but it's the last Sunday of the month, and we're keeping up a tradition on Black Canada Talking of having our wonderful panel, and this is done nowhere else in Canada. We have 3 Black Canadian thought leaders giving their takes on Canadian news stories and sometimes international news stories. And today we're basically going to keep it Canadianized, but let me get the important people on first. Well, finally, we've got her back. Hadn't spoken with her for a while, but it was so good to see her back. Elle Jones, what's going on, Elle? You've put yourself on mute, young lady.
See?
Oh, there we go.
Always working, workaholic level.
I know. Like too many Facebook followers and just too much work. Like, I mean, folks, I host this conversation. I can't get a hold of her. You know what I'm saying? So I had to before we went live, I had to get her phone number so I can text her, because I think that's the only way you can get a hold of her, unless you live in her city. You know what I'm saying? But it's great to see you back. How you been?
Good. We had a really nice event yesterday. The Elders of Africville organized a protest with help from many groups. So just raising attention to the lack of compensation for Africville, which is a historic Black community that was destroyed by the city in the 1960s. They bulldozed the church. They put people's stuff in garbage trucks as they were moving them out. And it's been obviously 60 years and still no compensation other than a fake museum church that was built on the site, which is received by many people as an insult. So yesterday there was a rally and march where people walked around the boundaries, had a car caravan around the boundaries of the former community. And that was nice to see people coming out. So I know we're going to talk about Black unity, later in the show, but that was a really nice, our eldest caddies Facebook and stuff. So, we had to help them out with the social media and the different tools and stuff. So, but that was good. Yesterday we were doing that, and yeah, just
there you go. Like, there's a gentleman from my community say I'm the hardest working Black man online. I said, I don't know about that, but thinking you're one of the hardest, forget color. You're one of the hardest working ladies I know, period. But that's a compliment.
Tell that to my employers. Maybe one day they'll give me a real job.
Not gonna go there. TMI. Let's next have up Mr. Warren Clarke. How you doing, Mr. Warren Clarke?
I am well. Thank you very much for asking, Elle. Appreciate you. Your day will come very soon. They need to recognize who you are, because I do, at least. So thank you for what you do for us in the East Coast. Sorry.
Oh, what you been up to?
Oh man, what have I not been up to? Geez. It's been very busy. Very humbled to be able to share my thoughts. A couple of media interviews recently, so I'm really humbled I could participate and share. Teaching's going well. Different way of teaching, online, especially with high school students as well. So. That's very unique, and then looking forward to teach college next semester. So just busy all around. I don't want to talk about my business. I'm well. Family's doing okay, and we're singing it. Thanks for asking.
All right, and Cesar, how we doing, Cesar?
Bonjour, hi everybody. Thank you, Dr. Vibe. I'm okay. Thanks for having me always.
And what you been up to?
Dr. Vibe, lots of things.
I think that's probably the worst question I can ask each of you, because we could just spend a whole hour just on what you guys have been up to. But what's been going on in your neighborhood, Cesar?
Dr. Vibe, there are a lot of things happening. But first of all, salute to my brother and sister, Elle Jones, Warren Clarke, yourself, BI Media, Look in the Back, and of course, all of our sisters and brothers worldwide. Salut, bonjour tout le monde, à tous nos frères et sœurs de par le monde. Busy as always, and to be honest with you, lots have happened this month, as every month, but I will make an announcement later today when we address the N-word, just as regarding our first topic. We will talk about it regarding police brutality and systemic racism injustice. I've been there in the protest. Of course, the measurements of our Blackness is not by being in the protest, but the more of us, just as even online and everything, all the efforts. So lots of things. Also been involved in regards of mental health. I've become a director on the board of a mental health institute, representing Roots and Culture Canada and our entire Black community in terms of diversity and inclusivity. And I mean, many things. I will just stop there, but
yeah. We'll
we'll
stop right there.
Yeah.
We'll get into there, and like to say thanks to everyone who's watching live or on the replay. We appreciate you, and we hope you appreciate us. So let's start with our first conversation topic: the Abdi verdict in Ottawa. Oh boy, oh boy. So you know what? I'm not going to give any context to it because I know each three of you can give some context, but who'd be willing to give some background and then bring it to the verdict, and then we can have you all share. Who wants to jump in first?
Well, I will, and my co-panelists, please jump in and add value where you see the need. This is a situation that happened in 2016 where a black, Afro-Caribbean black or ACB male was killed by the hands of police. This is not only going on its fifth year going on, but the results of this were very devastating, to say the least, and how the court system here in Ottawa dealt with it, and particularly how it's impacted the Black community. The one thing that I will mention that, it's not only the Black community. We need to focus on this and acknowledge that it's the Somalian community has been impacted. And I don't think, it's a lot of justice has come there to that community, particularly and acknowledging the trauma that they've experienced and continue to experience. I also think that it is important that we do acknowledge that, and we not only acknowledge it, but we stand in solidarity as a Black community, quote unquote, to actually start the healing process, because there's going to be a lot of healing going on. And with that, my last comment to this is, we also have to acknowledge that although the George Floyd situation and the Breonna Taylor situations of the world are very horrific. And they got a lot of attention worldwide. Here at home in Ottawa, the Abdi case didn't get as much attention, which it deserved. And then we saw the results of the police officer being found not guilty. Just proves that Black lives in Canada are further removed from being liberated than we think. So that's where I'll stop, and then I would like to hear others, please. Thanks.
Sure, I'll go.
Go ahead. Yep.
I mean, one thing I want to remind us, and something that's in Desmond Cole's book, for example, that he reminds us of, is that the Ottawa Police wore bracelets in defense of Ndema-Moussa, in solidarity with him after he killed Abdurrahman Abdi with his badge number, right? And they were wearing these rubber bracelets as they, stopped Black people on the street. So, when we talk about bad apples or reforming the police, I just want us to remember that the entire Ottawa police force sold these and wore these bracelets on the job to demonstrate, what their commitments are. And it's certainly not feeling sorrow for dead Black life. One of the things, and I haven't had time to read the judgment, but we know that he purchased illegal gloves with reinforcements that he wore on the job. And, I guess that's not a problem. Like, what we'll see is they'll pass some rule to be like, now you can't have like those gloves. And then, it's much like Kamala Harris trying to say that the solution to police brutality is let's ban chokeholds, as though Eric Garner didn't die by a chokehold when they were already banned in New York, right? So we're going to see some kind of BS ruling where they'll be like, now they can't wear those gloves, and that will be treated as some kind of step towards justice. So I think over and over and over again, I've said this on this show before, and I'll say it again, is these things need to teach us something. And what they need to teach us, again, is that, you know, we cannot make reform out of this. I always say the police are the best argument against reform. They make their own best argument against these things. These are people that wore a bracelet to defend the killer of a black man. So do we think that these people are capable of being reformed and they just need some body cameras and some anti-bias training? Or do we think maybe that's a corrupt, rotten, and disgusting institution that needs to go, right? Chief Peter Slawley is not going to be able to save the people that want to wear a bracelet, you know? So when we have a black police chief in charge and everyone's like, yeah, but we have Slawley. Well, look at what his own force, we talked about this last time we were on the show, you know, the Hitler memeing of Peter Slawley. And now we see this officer, unsurprisingly, I don't think anybody is surprised that he got off, but we see him getting off. And I think this needs to show us as black people that we need to stop engaging in these systems. And I think it's difficult because particularly with this summer, a lot of people who weren't necessarily engaged in these issues in a deep way. I mean, black people have always been, like, we know that black people die like the police. We know that black life isn't valued. Like, all black people know that. You don't have to have a PhD in black studies. Like, everybody knows that, like, instinctually and through lived experience. But, you know, more and more this summer, where people are coming to these conversations about defunding and prisons with a kind of new energy. But the problem is we have a lot of new joiners that want to hold us back to 20 years and be like, well, guys, come on, stop being so radical. Like, why are you talking about abolition? Well, this is why we talk about abolition. And so if you're a black person and you're just getting involved in these conversations, these moments should show you what many of us realized as we got involved in these conversations. Many of us started as reformists or, you know, liberals or people that thought we could chip around the system. I think most black people, you start there because that's what you learn. And then as you engage with these systems and you see more and more how violent they are and how we cannot win against them using their rules and how, no, we can't go to court and win. I think you radicalize. That's the process of radicalization. And I think a lot of black people are going through that and are going to have to further go through that, which is a kind of painful process, right? It's not easy as a process. I think it requires us to shift around our orientation to a lot of things, the world, to money, to systems, to, you know, narratives we've been taught, to our own beliefs. But I think this shows us again how necessary that work is. And one of the things I find hard in this time is how many, I don't care what white people say for the most part, like white people are going to be over here doing what white people do. But we also have black people that want to get angry with us when we talk about abolition or defunding and tell us we're being radical. What I think is radical is this. I think it's radical that a cop kills a black man, gets off, and we're expected to somehow believe that the justice system will ever support us or give us justice or is the route to go. So I know it's painful for us, but I think these things have to open up our path to understanding our liberation further. The last thing I'll say, I know probably a lot of people didn't read it, especially if you don't have a subscription to the Globe and Mail, because, you know, they put these things under the paywall. So who wants to read that? But there was an investigation in the Globe and Mail that came out yesterday. It's nothing I don't think that we don't know, but I think is news to perhaps some of the readers of the Globe and Mail that, yes, you know, the prison system is biased in terms of who gets access to parole and the discipline system. You know, they went through some of the records they have, and it just comprehensively showed, particularly with Indigenous people, because that's the only thing that's recorded. Like, they don't really record black people, but it showed how you have like a much harder time getting parole, how people on the risk scales that they have are completely biased against Indigenous people. We know that's true for black people. So that baked into the prison system is, you know, that you will always be scored higher on risk. You will always be given a high security rating. You will always have more trouble getting parole. That at every stage, we are going to be treated worse. My sister, who's a defense lawyer, always says, even if we only had to write essays, you know, like if that was the only punishment, black people would be given the hardest, longest essays, and they'd be marked, you know, like the least charitably. And that's always true. So we also have that report at the same time showing us again that the criminal justice system is not on our side. So I think as black people, we have to imagine something else and work towards it. We know we're not going to go to court and get justice, either when we're in court or when our killers are in court. So what does that look like? That's something I think as a community, we have to put some serious time into.
Wonderful. Elle, Cesar, add on.
Always, my brother and my sister are right. They're absolutely right in what they said. I will add, I was in the protest the day of the verdict on Tuesday the 20th, and I was there yesterday. First and foremost, my condolences to the Abdi family, my solidarity to GFA. And at the same time, one of the things that I have to say is that, and this is important for our sisters and brothers to hear, the system is not broken. The system is working perfectly as it should. We are the ones who, by not being white, are being constantly victims of injustice, even as we keep being told to protest peacefully, as if white history is known for peaceful protests. It is not. Just as to keep hoping and praying for some type of change that didn't come during slavery, colonization, segregation, etc., etc. What happened in terms of the Abdi trial, and Katia Peters, CEO of Roots and Culture Canada, and I were addressing this on the French CBC, Radio Canada. What happened is that Justice Kelly, in rendering his verdict, despite video evidence, despite the fact of use of tactical gloves that are not standard practice, despite so many elements, he basically rendered a verdict that reaffirms white supremacy in the city of Ottawa. I'm being careful in saying this because some would tell me, oh, we're in 2020, this is not 1980 or 1920. But you see, if I take an example, when our very own mayor, because I live here in Ottawa, when our very own mayor, Jim Watson, says he has trust in the justice system, let's be honest. We're talking about a white mayor. Well, yes, end of last year came out as LGBTQ, but let's be honest, LGBTQ are treated quite differently than Black people overall. White LGBTQ, understand me. So, truthfully, the verdict of Justice Kelly, especially not guilty on all charges, is an insult to Black dignity. A reminder that we live in a colonized land where every week Indigenous people get killed here, notably by police and other institutions. And yet, how many times do we see a white person in a position of authority be sentenced to jail? This is a connection to our brothers and sisters in the US, as in Brazil, as in France, Australia, Israel, England. It's that constant reminder of centuries of dehumanization of Blackness. This is basically a reminder of the fact that even in 2020, for the crazy year it's been regarding COVID and so many other things, despite all the protests regarding Black Lives Matter, despite the empowerment of Blackness, notably group economics, empowerment of Black girls, Black boys, etc., etc., it's a reminder that you have a justice that failed to show bravery, that failed to stand up and say Canada is actually going to hold up to what it claims to be about as a nation of rights. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace in the same sense as the Prime Minister taking a knee down and saying Black Lives Matter in the summer, aka performative social justice. It's a disgrace when a justice claiming in the text of the law he couldn't find anything without reasonable doubt to incriminate Monzion. So what is reasonable doubt? Allow me to say this, because when we say what is reasonable doubt, and when we say Justice Kelly renders such a verdict, can we really picture that a Black police officer could kill with tactical gloves that are not legal in terms of the force, could kill, notably under recording, a white person and be found not guilty on all charges, especially when we know last year in the very same Minneapolis where George Floyd got killed, I should say assassinated because of being Black, in that same Minneapolis last year, a Black police officer, also Somali like Abdirahman Abdi, Mohamed Noor, got sentenced to 12 and a half years in jail for having shot a white woman, Justine Damon, as he feared for his life. Was Monzion ever fearing for his life when he killed Abdi? The Damon family got awarded $20 million. What's the Abdi family going to be awarded? And even if they're awarded $1 or $1 million, that will never bring back Abdirahman Abdi. The police murder of Abdirahman Abdi is murder by Canada and the Western world of yet another, but our blackness, in reminding us that truthfully, it doesn't matter what religion of God you pray to. It doesn't matter what education you claim to have, what nice car you drive, what work you have, even if you have a white partner. In the reality of the system that we still live in today, in connection with our ancestors and our heroes of Pan-Africanism and notably Black feminism, etc., blackness still doesn't count. Très brièvement, mes frères et sœurs, en français, Warren a rappelé le fait de l'injustice de ce système par rapport au fait d'être noir, tout comme elle a rappelé le fait que dans ce système, le dialogue et le désir de bonne entente et l'espoir de changement tel notamment par la formation, training en anglais, ne fonctionnent pas. Et ainsi, j'ai rajouté le fait que par rapport à la famille Abdi, au-delà des condoléances et le fait que ce juge du nom de Kelly n'a fait que renforcer la notion de suprémacisme blanc et en ce sens de nous rappeler aux Noirs, non seulement ici à Ottawa, au Canada, mais de par le monde, que malgré une année 2020 de Black Lives Matter, de COVID, etc., la vie des Noirs ne compte pas, car il est très difficile d'imaginer un policier noir qui traiterait tel, qui tuerait tel, et notamment devant caméra, une personne blanche, et ce policier noir échappera à la justice. Je vous encourage à découvrir le cas du policier noir Mohamed Noor à Minneapolis, qui l'année dernière a été condamné à 12 ans de prison pour avoir notamment tiré sur une femme blanche, Justine Damon, alors qu'il se sentait en danger. Et la famille Damon a reçu 20 millions. Voici l'inégalité du système face à face.
Excellent start from all three. Does anyone else want to add on to the comments that have been made there? Like, it seems that Ottawa seems to be the hot spot, one of the hot spots in Canada for
Absolutely.
racial injustice. Like, I know, it just continues. Now, I know probably Elle, in your part of the world in the East, there's probably a lot of racial injustice, especially when it comes to anti-Black racism, police. Are you seeing, has this always been a pre-existing condition in the East? Because we have, over the last few months, as we've come on regular, we're hearing a lot about Ottawa. What about goings on out East?
Well, I mean, literally, Ottawa is where Parliament is, so it's like the mothership of white supremacy.
I've never heard Ottawa being referred to that way. Okay, all right.
The government literally operates out of, would be racist. It's like, yes, this is where the state, the beacon of white supremacy. But of course, in Nova Scotia, where we have, the first Black contact in North America is Matthew DeCosta in Nova Scotia, right? So, very early contact with the Mi'kmaq people. So there's just, centuries of white supremacy embedded here. And we know with the Black history here, the first race riot in history in North America is recorded in Shelburne, Nova Scotia in the 1750s, right? So, Black people have had a long period of settlement here, and that means we've had the longest period of contact with white supremacy here as well. Like, that's just fact. So when we look at Shelburne, we have, white people that were burning out the houses of Black people, prompted by a Black preacher, David George, who had the temerity to preach to white people as well, right? So spreading the word of Jesus was just a step too far, I guess. And, white people rampaged for 10 days. And I want to tie that to what we're seeing in the fisheries right now, where, again, we have white settlers absolutely on a rampage, aided and abetted by the RCMP. People are often saying the RCMP aren't doing their jobs, but they're not just passive. They're actually actively, collaborating with the settler violence in the fisheries. And again, not surprising. I mean, that's what the RCMP do. This idea that the RCMP don't defend corporations and defend state violence. This happens again and again and again. What we see is the government, obviously using laws to push Indigenous people or Black people off our land, steal resources, do violence to us. The courts that collaborate through making these injunctions, which we're seeing, here with Alton Gas, we're seeing a Mohawk territory in Caledonia where, a housing development is more important than Indigenous being rights and sovereignty, right? In Wet'suwet'en with the pipeline, where the RCMP are enforcing for the courts injunctions. So every level of the justice system, not just the court or the police, we know that the government, the courts, the police all defend the corporations, defend money, defend power against Black and Indigenous people who challenge that, and particularly with Indigenous sovereignty. We know that's the greatest threat to corporate power in Canada. You can't run your pipeline through sovereign land, right? So this violence is part of this 500-year process of dispossessing people. So we're seeing the same thing. I mean, out here, what we're seeing with the fisheries, which is like white people burning down buildings and putting nail strips and burning cars and peeing in people's cars and going out every night and performing acts of terrorism, because that's what it is. If this was Black or Muslim people doing these acts, it would be terror, and people would be charged with not only like attempted murder, but all kinds of conspiracy charges. But if you're a white fisherman in Nova Scotia, like, that's just, the RCMP will defend you. So this is absolutely embedded in Canada's colonial violence. And I also want to point out Caledonia as well, right? Like where after weeks of picking people off sort of one by one by giving people arrests as they stepped on land, the police raided 3 days ago, shot rubber bullets at people, including women, that are just defending their land. And again, to defend a housing development, Mackenzie Meadows, where Indigenous people don't even have housing in Canada, but the courts will defend this housing development on sovereign Mohawk land. So like, none of this is a surprise. They're actually doing their jobs. Like, when people are like, they should do their jobs, like, this is their job, to defend the colonial state and to defend corporate power and money. That is their job, and they're doing it very well. And that requires killing, maiming, and shooting and doing violence to us.
Thank you, Elle. Gentlemen, do you want to add anything before we move forward?
To be honest, I'm just checking time because we have a couple of topics that I know we're going to touch on. So, okay. I think, respectfully, I think we.
All right, no problem. That's good. So our next conversation piece, and before we go further, thank you for everyone for their comments that they're contributing in real time. I see Ms. Peters talking about was the process I went through as a co-chair of the Ottawa Police Committee. She also says, I came to the table with the best of intentions, but quickly saw how they operate with their indirect tactics. We have another person, S1D Buzz. Here in the U.S., they use the grand jury to excuse themselves from the law. And Nicole is saying, so on point, Elle. And Con is saying, good day, peeps. We're continuing down the road here during the topics. There is now an event, unfortunate event, but not surprising. A university professor in Ottawa has been used the N-word. Surprise, surprise. What do we have to say about that? I'll be interested to see what Mr. Clarke has to say about this too, because he's in academia. Yeah. Sorry to put the pressure on you, but who wants to go on that first?
I that's why I wanted to stop Elle, and let's talk about this. No, I'm joking, Elle. Here's the thing. For those who are listening and for those who are in the academic space currently, the academic space is designed for critical thinking. It's designed for us to go beyond just the norm of thinking. And when you reach that point of you thinking that you've gotten to that place of complete understanding, it forces you to go deeper. And that's part reason why I love the job or the work that I do within academia. However, when we talk about critical thinking, we have to also acknowledge the people we're critical thinking with. We can't just have these, haphazard, arguments without understanding if people could comprehend that level of thinking or that level, that thought that we're thinking on, because we don't want to lose people on the way as educators. We don't want to put people in any compromising positions to think negatively about the topic, but we want to encourage people to think robustly and also being open-mindedly about these topics. Now, you don't necessarily, speaking so S1 Dubs is asking in what context was the word used. I'm about to get to that, S1 Dubs. When we talk about this situation in particular, the N-word was used in the class, but it was not set, from what I've come to know, in a way where it was used to encourage critical thinking. And you don't have to say the word to encourage critical thinking. For example, I can talk about the N-word and talk about the historical context, where it's come from, and how it's moved from its original state to now in our contemporary moments, and how it's been in fashion in many Black communities as a reclaiming of that word and to create a relation of solidarity among Black folk. And not once have I used the N-word. So when we come to this notion of why it was used in the class, as an educator, I ask myself was it in line with critical thinking? Was it in line with encouraging students to think broadly about this word and how it moves and how it shapes people within our Black communities? And the answer is no. It was used based on a passage that was read in a text. So when we think about who used it, which was a white professor, then we also have to ask ourselves, were they using it in a way to reclaim power or to gain power over students, particularly those who are of ACB community, ACB's young learners? And in this case, it does point to that. It points to, well, I can use it, I'm going to use it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And my whiteness encourages or allows me or gives me access to use this. And because of my privilege as a professor, I have all right to use it. And that is right there in itself is problematic. Now I get to my next point, where we had 37 plus university professors from University of Ottawa respectfully saying, signing a petition to support this professor, encouraging that the university is a place for critical thinking. As I mentioned before, it is. However, when we talk about the context and why it was used and when it was used and who was it used among, particularly Black students sitting in that class, when we talk about third level, I think it was third level university students, that's not to say that they were not able to critical think on the word, but what were you using it for and why were you using it? That's what we should be acknowledging. And none of that has been mentioned in any petition or any social discourse around this topic that can encourage us to understand the rationale for this professor to use it. So this is another example of white supremacy using a derogatory term against that's always been fashioned for and against Black community members or African descent people, and only to degrade and only to dehumanize. So there was no critical thinking around this word. There was no, setting the tone in this class to say, students, we're going to talk about the N-word. And it's going to arise in some of the context, and not even acknowledging the humility to say, you know what, I acknowledge that there's Black students in this class, and because there's Black students in the class, I actually want to acknowledge that I'm not going to say this word because it may create trauma, or it may do harm and do harm. So all in all, as an educator, I'm all for critical thinking on various topics, many topics. But I recognize my privilege as a professor. And because of my privilege as a professor, I have to be tread cautious when I do have conversations regarding race, sexuality, gender, for those matters, because I can do harm just by mentioning, thinking that I have all right to mention without understanding my audience. So it's important that as educators, we understand that the use of the words we use can inflict harm. It goes to that saying that, the pen is mightier than the sword. When we talk about the pen being mightier than the sword, is when you write down things or when you use words based on that analogy, it can cut deeper than a knife, and it can leave harmful situations among people. So we have to think critically again. What is critical thinking in the university space? How it's defined? And who has power to use certain words, which can actually empower or it can disenfranchise people. So we have to think of these things critically.
Thank you so much, Warren, on that. Who'd like to join in next? So this seems to be a lady. Ms. Elle, go ahead.
Cesar, that's just me. Thank you, Warren. Just a couple of things I want to add. One, I'm always amazed at the hills that white people want to die on. I'm really going to fight for, my right to say the N-word. But as Desmond Cole said, it's not their right to say it. It's their insistence that we sit there and take it, right? That's what they're actually fighting for. But let's not forget, it's not just that this professor said it. It's that then a bunch of academics wrote a letter defending the need to say it under the idea that this is what academic freedom is. So we just saw at University of Toronto where a dean of law was not hired because of her views on Palestine, and because people complained, that she had made statements about in solidarity with Palestinians. And there was an outcry on that, but that happens all the time, that people don't get jobs. More often in academia, it's not even losing your job, it's still never hire you. Exhibit A being me. If you talk about this stuff, you'll just never get in the door. They'll just make sure you're never there. And that happens all the time, and it's just normal. But then the hill that people really want to die upon is white people need to say the N-word. That's what they need to do. This is what we're going to go for. But of course, again, my comments are always are we surprised? Are we surprised that a law school in Ottawa would think that it's necessary for Black people to sit there and shut up and hear the N-word, and the only people that are wrong in that situation are the Black people for complaining because somehow academic freedom or debate or discussion requires us to hear that. That's not new again. So I'm not shocked. I work in academia, and it's not even that, we would be called that word. So we're treated like that word every single day as well. So as these institutions make Black Lives Matter statements, we know how they actually treat particularly their precarious staff, particularly Black women. Black students have jumped off balconies here and almost died because of the stress of being in school and the racism they experience, and then being kicked out of school because they're on academic probation. This is what goes on in the academy. So I think that people like to imagine that the academy is this progressive space, and part of, Noam Chomsky talks about this, is the manufacturing of consent, right? That part of the lie that takes place is actually to pretend that these institutions are left wing, and that benefits people because you're like, if you're any further left than university, you must be absolutely crazy. And in fact, universities are extremely conservative places because they're institutions, and institutions are here to protect the status quo. And an academic institution, which has all kinds of money flowing through it, whether through research grants or, the donors that put their names on the building, is a conservative institution. It's a myth that it's this liberal place. The right wing loves to spread that, we're all Marxists that are just spreading socialism all day, every day. And, conservatives can't speak. That is not true. And anybody who's worked a minute in academia knows what a conservative place academia is. And I don't mean conservative like necessarily people vote for the Conservative Party, although that's true of the business department. I mean that it's a place that's averse to change. It's a place that always reverts to the status quo. It's a place that always reverts to the way things are done and tradition. And so the notion that, Black people are even entering this space is destabilizing to the academy until they can steal our work, rename it, and get grants for it, which happens down the road. I think we also have to understand that people always act shocked because we've been fed this myth, this right-wing myth that, the people who get canceled in academia are right-wingers. And it's not true. The people who get canceled are Black people, particularly Black women, people who support Palestine, Indigenous people. We continue to be the victims of this institution that insists on its right to say the N-word. So, in some ways, it's tell us what you're really about. I'm glad you guys wrote that letter because you're showing us what you're really about. And you're showing us the lie of your pretense that, you actually care about Black Lives Matter. What you care about is that white people can say whatever they want and Black people have to take it. And that's true in the academy, and it's true everywhere else we are as well. So, Warren summed up the academic issues really well, and I'm just going to add that piece as well. But all my comments are always, I am not surprised. I feel like I say the same thing all the time. Are we shocked? But, are we shocked? No, it's absolutely on brand for University of Ottawa and for every other institution as well.
All right, Elle, much thanks. Cesar.
Thank you so much, Warren and Elle. To begin, first of all, just two things I have to state. Number one, I will say the N-word, and you will understand why. And number two, not to recuse myself, but I've actually been approached as an equity expert by the Faculty of Arts to notably address these very issues of equity, diversity, and inclusivity, which you understand include addressing this. So what can I really say regarding this controversy? And in support of my brother and sister, one of the things I have to mention is that I gave my support to the president of the university, Mr. Jacques Frémont, but you have to understand the nature of it. I agree with the professors that there must not be censorship in terms of academia and the intellectual content of the university. That said, that absolutely does not give an excuse for any person, especially white person, to use the N-word. And I say this in terms of, Warren alluded to it, language and power. If you use in terms of academic thinking, Michel Foucault addressing language and power and how it becomes a creation at an intellectual level in terms of the dominant versus the oppressed narrative. But at the same time, the very nature of these universities in being conservative places, as Elle was saying, is that they tend to reinforce the very nature of domination. So when we have, for example, professors, overwhelmingly white, who go on to give support to their colleague, which I can totally understand, there's a problem in the fact that when they're teaching, for example, French history or French literature, do they teach the students that the great French philosopher Voltaire viewed black people as les nègres, lower or close to the rank of animals? When teaching in Arabic studies, do they teach that Ibn Khaldun, the great Arab thinker, notably said to be the precursor of sociology, do they really teach how he viewed black people in terms of the white students? When they teach medicine, do they teach about Marion Sims and how he dehumanized black women? I can give so many examples. And then when we have this very controversy, one of the things we must understand, the very nature of intent versus impact makes it that the very moment there is a black student who says he's offended by the use of the word, the professor basically has an obligation, if I'm not saying of empathy, but even a professional obligation to recognize that pain, for the very simple reason here, those who are white in the room are not the ones who are targeted and who are carrying the scar, the stigma on the skin that comes with the word. As such, when we have the extension of this debate going, for example, into the Quebec Parliament, with Prime Minister Legault being offended and wanting to give support to the teachers, the professors, it's a hypocrisy. It's a hypocrisy of a Quebec government that refuses to recognize systemic racism, even though they have an indigenous woman, Lady Joyce, who died in the hospitals, and systemic racism is very much alive in Quebec. It's also the same hypocrisy in terms of the very nature of support to that white professor, who, by the way, she did apologize, Professor Lieutenant Duval, if I'm correct. She did apologize, but you have English professors who notably signed a petition clearly saying there is no proper context in which the need of the use of the N-word, aka nigger, needs to be applied. And when we look at it in terms of extension, so you will have francophones such as in Quebec, and some of these professors mentioned it, you have the work of Pierre Vallière, Nègre Blanc d'Amérique, in reference to the mistreatment of Québécois by Anglophones, aka white Québécois by Anglophones. I'm sorry, it's a hypocrisy. To refer to white Québécois back then, a few decades ago, as the white niggers of America, how were black people treated in Quebec? They were treated worse. And at the same time, when we look at it very truthfully in terms of the very society we live in, I always advocate for it. Black people, stop calling yourself by the N-word. There is no nigger with the ER or nigger with the A that makes it okay. Stop calling yourself such. But let us remember something. Politeness, dressing well, speaking the Queen's English or French from France has not made white supremacy treaters better. Ultimately, and I give credit here to that professor, we must give her credit, she admitted she never thought, I'm not saying she's lying, but she admitted she never thought it would take that measure, and she apologized. And as such, there should be a reflection in terms of the academic circles, notably of the other professors. And one of my favorite professors, for whom I have the utmost respect, one of his books is actually right here, did sign the petition. So there needs to be a reflection by them in terms of, as Elle was saying, why is it that they're willing to fight and to stand for that? What is it that makes it in terms of culture, in terms of upbringing, that makes it that the very pain of a black student to say, I'm not okay with that word, and there was more than one black student, makes it that there should be a rallying instead of being like, we apologize, the word should not have been used. These are different times. So when even the comparison is made with the LGBT community and the queer word, it's the LGBT community who basically, in reappropriating the word, have become also okay with that word being said by heterosexual. It's not comparable to the N-word. It is not. You cannot hide your queerness. Excuse me for those who are LGBTQ, but being black, you can't hide your blackness. It's a stigma that is still very much alive, and that links to the previous topic as we're talking about police brutality, systemic racism, and so many other issues. Très brièvement,
I just want to cut in. Sorry, Cesar. I'm going to make it maybe a little bit controversial now, because two things you had mentioned just now, and I understand, and folks in the Francophone who are Francophone, I apologize, we didn't get to the French side, but there was two things that I want to ask in a question to acknowledge. The first thing you just mentioned was you support the president of University of Ottawa. Did you mention that? Is that what I heard?
I did say I support in siding with the students.
Okay, maybe I didn't hear that part. So I want to actually tackle that in a moment. And the second part, you said you gave credit to that teacher who said it, who said the N-word. Is that what you said?
I said that in contrast to the other professors not stepping back on why that they were defending.
All right. So here's where this is where I really want people to take in what I'm about to say, because this is important. Yes. As I mentioned, that words are, the sword is the pen is always going to be mightier than the sword. And as academics, as activists, as educators, as people who have this privilege to knowledge, we have it in our duty to ensure that when we make a statement, or if we say something that could sound controversial, we need to explain that in depth. That's what we owe it to our audience. And I'm not here to pinpoint you, Cesar. I think you're amazing, but this is a very touchy subject. Maybe because the work I do in academia and the work I will continue to do, particularly mentoring young Black students who enter that academic space and who dwell in the academic space to find their own potential for their future careers. This is a very touchy topic for me because I see it all the time. There are students, as like Elle had mentioned, that are committing suicide. This is a reality. There's students, and Black students, mind you, there's Black students being carted on campus religiously, continuous to this day, all right? There are no supports for Black students as much as we think, right? And we need to be more conscious of the words we use in terms of support. I'm not trying to bring down nobody's name on this call, on this show. The president of University of Ottawa, that's the president of University of Ottawa, period, right? The teacher who took on this role to teach students, like myself, Elle, you'll know, Cesar, this education didn't happen in one day. This education didn't happen in 3 years. This education happened over years of studying and years of reading and years of writing. We owe it to ourselves. It's not to say that mistakes don't happen, but we need to ensure that there is not only this, I'm sorry, because white supremacy does that very well. They sing the tune of I'm sorry very well. And by doing that, we do this. Oh, well, they're sorry. They're moving on. No, if we don't stop that right now, then we will say it's okay to do that. And that's not okay. The amount of students that to this day, listen, I'm very humbled that, a lot of these students can be vulnerable and come speak to me about their concerns. But the amount of students that I encounter every day that goes through that type of microaggression or macroaggression, whichever one you want to use, is ridiculous. It is on another level. So we cannot give a pass. And it's going to bring us into our next conversation, Black solidarity. Because right there is an example right there. We are not unified. We are not on the same page. I am not going to accept that. I don't care who you are. Because you know what? The people who are coming into the university space are going to take on my job after. And we have a duty. I have a duty to ensure that I give them the education needed so they can be successful. So no, we need to give them the wording, the articulation to support them. So when they go and take on our jobs and in the future, they do it with grace and they do it with on strength. And we need to. I'm going to bring up Elle. I'm sorry. But we need to also support people like Elle. Elle mentioned twice in the show that her university is not supporting her. How dare us? We sit on here and say we're going to support people. University of Ottawa had a town hall last year, and still nothing has happened. And we're going to support them? No. We can't do that. We cannot do that. Cesar, I love you, brother, but I love you. I'm going to tell you the way I see it, and I would appreciate you do it for me too. That's just how love goes. Love is going to be harsh, but love could be very sweet at the end if we get over this hump. And we need to watch our words. Stop there. Go ahead.
Don't forget the context of support. Supporting the president who stood up with the students. This is what made it the controversy, and calling out the other professors for supporting it. There are Anglophone professors, the racialized and Black professors also supported the students. You see what I mean? So it's in the context. It's not, I never support anyone just for the sake of support. It's always within the context. And you are absolutely right. I will never stand for just, like white supremacy always does so well. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't really mean this. I was misunderstood or whatever. I'm going through some family drama and therefore mental breakdown, aka excuses that are never given to Blacks, as you understand. But yes, absolutely. We absolutely need to stand against this.
Look, you see how easy I picked this up?
Absolutely.
You see how easy I picked that up?
Mm-hmm.
They can do the same thing. And trust me, a lot of them are doing it. They're picking this up, they're reading it, and they're not doing anything about it.
Absolutely.
We need to ensure.
Can
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Elle.
Say that. Can we talk about how in 2020 someone's actually like, "Oh, I didn't know the N-word was bad." Like, how did you time travel in from 1900 to the law school? Like, can I have your time machine? So, I mean, this is a claim to innocence, right? And we know that white supremacy constantly does this, like claims to amnesia and claims to innocence, right? So, I mean, I think Cesar's point is at least she apologized, whereas like everybody else, and this is like the low bar that we start holding white people to, which is like what bar at all? I think the point he was saying is that like the colleagues decided to go with this, like defending it, even as she was like, I'm not even going to defend it, right? I think that's the bar you were trying to go with that. But that bar is so low. Like, I mean, at the same time, when you're saying, well, I just didn't know the N-word was bad, like, okay, then you shouldn't be teaching because obviously you don't know anything. So I don't know, like, then my point is, what are you actually qualified for? If you're in 2020, you somehow missed, like 80 years of discussion, then I'm not sure I want you teaching a law class. Like, that would be like me being like, I don't know where England is. Like, is that a place? I've never heard of it. Like, should I know this? It's just so outrageous as an excuse as well. Like, how could you lack knowledge?
Like, Elle, to your point, I'm sorry if I'm dominating. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to educate people. That's my job. One thing I learned from my mentor last 2 weeks ago, Warren, your job in life is to educate. So I'm gonna give you all the business. That's just what it is. You know what I mean? One of the things we need to focus on is our social capital as Black folk. Our social capital. We need to understand what that is. That's number one. You know what I mean? Number two, we need to understand what will versus skill is in the context of this situation. Like I mentioned, I've got 10 years in the university, going on 11 years. You know what I mean? How dare I go and say some controversial stuff and not get reprimanded for it? I'll get reprimanded for like that because of my skin, because of my gender, because I should know better, right? We can't, this is not about doing a public shaming on anybody. But we need to ensure that we not only understand our social capital and how we can better our communities, understand that we need to stand front and stand firm against these situations when they happen. You know what I mean? I'm not like it is what it is. Like, I work with University of Ottawa for with my project, the Afro-Caribbean Mentorship Program. I work with both University of Ottawa and Carleton University. Do you understand what I mean? And I'm in those executive meetings with the vice presidents and whatnot, and the presidents of the school. And if I have the opportunity to teach, I'm going to do it there too. Because the only way we're going to change this narrative is we continue to call out this stuff. James Baldwin did it. Fanon did it. I heard Elle Jones mentioning Desmond Coles a few times. He's doing it. Nah, we don't stop the train there. We cannot make that give a pass. We just can't.
Absolutely. Dr. Vibe, you're on mute.
I'm telling you, I'm just steering the ship here. So too many comments flying right now. I don't know if I should read. You know what? I'm going to go through some of the comments really quick because there's been so many that came in. S1 Dub says there are no Black student unions on university campuses in Ottawa. You asked that a question. Ms. Peters says, I do agree with Warren's point. Ms. Peters again says they can't let them get away with it. Just, I'm sorry. Sarah from Ottawa says, I'm really embarrassed by my alma mater. That's not good. That's not good. And Sarah also saying being an academic is no excuse to use racial slurs in the classroom. These people aren't paying such a high tuition fees to be insulted. Good point. Good point. Now we have one more conversation topic, folks. We don't. This is going to take some time. So, panelists, are you willing to go with this one, or do you want to send it for the next conversation?
I'm ready.
Let's bring it, folks. All right, let's go for it. All right. Before we went on live, we always have a mishmash of what we're going to chat about. But I think this one's a good time, especially at this time during the 2020 walk. Black solidarity. Now, Warren, you wanted to talk about this for a specific reason, so can you take the lead on this, and the others will join in?
Yeah, thanks. And again, to let people know on this call, Cesar's my brother. I don't care. You know what I mean? We have to have uncomfortable conversations to get comfortable. That's it. You know what I mean? Some of you guys are gonna, like what I say, and some of you guys are gonna be like, "Ooh, Warren, that's a little bit out there." And you're darn right, it's gonna be. You know what I mean? But I'm trusting that we can create that relational solidarity, so we can understand our people has strength, right? So when we talk about solidarity, the first thing we gotta acknowledge is, what is blackness? A lot of people has a misconception of what blackness really means or what it's supposed to mean. A lot of people don't even understand that the black identity. If you know this, great. If you don't know this, now you're gonna know. The black identity is not your identity. We need to start thinking about our African descent origins more distinctly. A lot of people don't understand the connection between, example, what's going on in Nigeria and what's happened and what that means in our quote unquote black communities. And because that is an example that's happening right now, a lot of us black and North Americans don't see how we can work in a relational solidarity with our Nigerian brothers right now and sisters right now, where they're going through the tough time they're going through. Right. So when we talk about solidarity, the first thing is we have a huge identity politics that's plaguing our black community. Hence the reason why when we see the Nigerian or we see the Caribbean black person, they're at odds at one another because they don't even see themselves as the same. But we need to focus on not only acknowledging that we are the same, we come from the same, African continent, different countries, obviously, and respecting our differences. But we need to understand we have an opportunity to work together more collectively, right? There's, going back to Abdi Rahman Abdi, one of the things that I've noticed, I'm taking stock of, is that why we're not seeing the black community show up the way in which we saw the black community show up to Black Lives Matter. We should have seen that. There was maybe a couple hundred people, but not as much as what happened this past summer. And I get it. The climate is changing. However, we need to support black people under the umbrella of African descent people. We need to, And when we talk about black solidarity, we need to acknowledge that, we're all under the same, pressures of white supremacy. Another thing that divides us greatly in our community is gender. There's always a talk that, black men go through it worse or black women go through it worse, but now we're still facing the same oppression. So we need to recognize that, if we're not able to help each other hand in hand, then we can't get to that thing called black solidarity. We're going to have people, having difference of opinions. The difference of opinions is all right. But the difference of opinions that we are experiencing, where we're all experiencing white supremacy, I don't know how we function that way as black people. It's really, if you really take the moment to think about it, would you walk right now in public and say hi to a black person who you don't know? That is a common thing in the Caribbean islands. You walk past your elder, you say hi mom, or hi grandma, or hi auntie. We don't even do that here. If we look at what's happening in Toronto, for example, Toronto's going through one of the highest gun rates that city's ever seen, and it's mainly among black young men. When we talk about this thing called collective understanding, we need to understand our collective understanding is not as collective as what we think. One of the things, my last thing, I don't want to take up too much time, obviously, because there's other two people here that respectfully are brilliant people. All of us are brilliant, even people that are listening. Sometimes we don't say something, you're still brilliant. So remember that. The other thing too, right, is when you talk about black solidarity in the sense of fighting white supremacy. We have too many moments where we don't understand how white supremacy, white settler colonialism, impacts our minds. You know what I mean? That's why it's easy for us to say things like, and again, I'm not throwing shade, Cesar, I'm going to say it though. It's easy for us to say things, well, I side or I support the president. Or, it's easy for us to say things like, it's good that she apologized. No. We need to be collectively walking that same beat, beating that same drum. Because as soon as one of us gets out of line and says, oh, it's okay, then what do you think white supremacy is going to say? Well, a black person co-signed it, and they're the speaker of all black people, so I guess it's okay. You know, how many times have I walked down the hall in Carleton University and I see a group of black students with that one white student, and that white student said the N-word, and I look at them and I'm like, whoa, that ain't bothering you? That didn't make you shift, right? So like, you know, we have to understand, if we're not working together, then we're working against each other, bar none. We just need to be better at that.
Who's next?
Go ahead, Elle. Go ahead.
You can go ahead, Cesar, if you want. But if you go last, you can translate, I guess, as well.
Right.
I agree with what Warren's saying. I also think, though, we have to make a distinction between political critique and solidarity, because I think what often happens in the Black community is that political critique is taken as like that. And then people get uncomfortable and they're like, oh, no, you should unify. I'm like, I'm not unifying with Black conservative. Like, I understand that they experience racism. If they're experiencing racism, I'm going to be there for them, right? Like, if you're the Black woman that ran for leadership of the Conservative Party, if you're experiencing racism, I think we should speak out. But at the same time, I'm not going to be in solidarity with that. And I think we also have to name those political differences, that Black people are not all on the same political page. And in many cases, there are Black people that are collaborating with systems that are harming us, and we need to be willing to call that out. I was just having a conversation earlier in the day and saying that it's going to be terrifying in the States when Biden's in, because first we're going to get 3 years of Biden's just cleaning up Trump's mess, and then we're going to get Queen Kamala just make her be president. And we know that Kamala's record is terrible, but nobody's allowed to speak about it. I'm not going to yes Queen Kamala Harris, who put, Black parents in jail while not prosecuting Steve Mnuchin, right? Like, I'm not going to co-sign that, and I don't care if it's a Black woman. She's part of a harmful system, and that needs to be called out. We already went through this with Obama, and Obama derangement syndrome, where none of us were able to speak about the real harms that Obama caused to African people, to Black people. So I think we need to also distinguish that. And I think also calls for unity often go one way. So we're supposed to all support the elites, right? So this is like the Kamala Harris, Barack Obama. So this is also this idea of like, you should shut up about your critique of Kamala Harris or Barack or the Black university president or the Black police chief, because they have it really hard and you owe them solidarity. But Black people, particularly the further left you are, we can be called out all the time publicly and called crazy and dismissed and alienated, right? And there's no call for unity on our behalf. And that's part of respectability politics. So going to Warren's point, what's actually quite recent is even people's ability to stand with criminalized Black people or mentally ill Black people or people who are living with disabilities or people living in poverty. Because very traditionally, part of what we've done is always supported the elites and then said those people are disposable. And in fact, they embarrass us. That's why we say all Black lives matter, because we're coming to understand more and more as a collective that we can't say that criminal is not part of me, that person being deported not part of me, right? We have to really resist that. And of course, that's a survival technique. We understand where it came from, right? That, our grandparents are like, we will get lynched or burned down if we step out of line, so everybody be correct, right? The idea that if we just dressed right and talked right and kept our heads down, that was the only way we could even possibly imagine keeping ourselves safe from white terror that's constantly lurking. And that's, though, internalizes us as a notion of respectability that then is actually what's divisive in our community, right? These class politics of, light skin and who's got an education, who's got a credential, and then those people we don't support. So I think we also have to unify going that way, right? Like, our call to unity has to be for the people who are in prisons, who are in mental institutions, who are being deported, who are living in poverty. And we have to stop allowing ourselves to be told that we should be embarrassed by those people, that they're somehow lesser Black people. Because then what we have is a small class of elites who are allied with white supremacy, who call upon our loyalty, right? And then we're expected to give our loyalty to people who have actually given their loyalty to white supremacy over us, right? When Barack Obama is presiding over a carceral state and incarcerates Black men, he's not on my side. When Barack Obama dropped so many bombs on the Middle East and Africa that he ran out of bombs, he's not on my side. And I'm not going to stand for that. So I think we also have to look at how bourgeois identity politics really play into this. And I think Kamala Harris is going to be an absolute nightmare in this regard, because we're just going to be like, there'll be memes, she just has to put on Timberlands, and then I'm supposed to, as a Black woman, clap and cheer and yes queen and slay queen. When she's presiding over a prison state and, she's going to be starting wars, whatever they do, and that's not in our interest as well. So I think we also have to learn to engage in that political debate, while also we can recognize that even Barack, even Kamala, they experienced racism too, and we rightfully should speak out and call that out. and stand in solidarity with that as well. But we can also recognize where their allegiances lie, because it's not with Black people.
Thanks for the ad, Elle Jones. Cesar.
What I have to say is really like, the topic of Black solidarity and unity obviously is one that truly should come in terms of every Black conversation, intellectual or not, aka. And as such, allow me, Warren inspired me, so allow me to show a book from my shelf, Africa Unite. This is a French translation, but it's a book originally, well, it's actually based on Kwame Nkrumah's writing. Kwame Nkrumah, leader of the first African nation to exit colonialism, Ghana, in 1957. Why am I showing this in terms of Africa Unite? By Africa Unite, you understand it's Pan-Africanism, and the Africa in question is Black nations and Black communities worldwide. You see, at the end of the 60s, mid and end of 60s, Malcolm X, as Martin Luther King, came to greatly fear this integration process in terms of, as MLK put it, I fear having taken my people into a burning house. Integration that will kill the activism of Black people in terms of the majority. We look at it in terms of Black people don't see themselves as a monolith. We see ourselves in terms of so many divisions, and too many divisions that are fostered by non-Blacks, Christian, Muslim, etc., Hindus, but also politics, and even in terms of, whether you live in the hood or you don't live in the hood, or you have such education or you went to these type of schools. It always works for a detriment in the very Cesar Roman logic of divide to conquer, aka we become constantly weak, and as such, by default, we tend to repeat a logic of crabs in the barrel. However, why is it that the crabs are already in the barrel? This is where the Black consciousness comes from, that in terms of a world of white supremacy, we're not just Black, of course, we have the different ethnicities, the different background, and we should never forget the different realities, whether you are, the descendant of slavery, but you have slavery as colonization in your past. However, in terms of this world, in terms of the reality of the space and time we live in, we are Black first. This is why we must educate our youth, but also our adults. We must educate them in terms of having that Black consciousness at the forefront of whatever second or third identity they have. Let us never forget that more and more cities are having Black police chiefs, where the police chief is Black in a city where Black people are being victim of white killer cops who are escaping justice. Elle was absolutely right speaking in terms of Barack Obama. I was there in 2008 as an international volunteer working for the Obama campaign. But for me, it was just for the symbolism of a Black man in the White House in terms of showing our potentials. But once he's elected, once he's president of the United States, he's just like any other one. And we have to hold them accountable. We have to be able to have hard, difficult, and accountability questions towards all of us, no matter the position of power or the position of prestige or title, which doesn't really mean much in terms of white supremacy, by the way. Obama was called by the N-word, just as you have so many Black athletes who can lose their entire wealth or fortune due to a false accusation or due to a bad encounter with police. We have to come together. We have to build our strength in terms of addressing not only the very element that make us seem, because we are not weak, but we seem weak, from group economics to having a true political power. And political power, I don't just mean in terms of what PDD was talking in terms of a Black party, but so that whoever is the Black person that we see at the forefront, we had that conversation in terms of Leslie Lewis and the Conservative Party of Canada. Where was the platform regarding systemic racism? That's a problem. You see, so all these type of questions, all these type of topics, but that starts in terms of the household, and that starts in terms of us as a community making ourselves strong, because we can't be there relying on the simple fact of a Black person being more mediatized or being in a position of power to represent all of us. The previous topic we had regarding the N-word, I go back to what Warren was saying. We have to hold each other accountable. When you look at, for example, the leader of the Liberal Party of Quebec, Dominique Anglade, basically giving that pass, as Warren was actually saying, even though she's Black and many in the Haitian Black community say she's bougie, she's bourgeois, so she's detached from the reality of those who are the majority of Black people. So, to say it very briefly in French, en français, la conversation sur la solidarité et l'unité de la communauté noire en est une qui est centrale à nos conversations, qu'importe que la conversation soit dite intellectuelle ou non, car éventuellement, le système de suprématie blanche tend à nous diviser, que ce soit au travers des religions, des identités politiques, de l'éducation, du salaire, etc., etc., et notamment de la sortie des cités, du ghetto par rapport à vivre en milieu blanc. Nous devons éduquer nos jeunes, mais aussi nos adultes à avoir cette conscience noire, qu'importe la seconde, troisième, etc., identité par laquelle ils vont se réclamer. Car ceux qui sont au pouvoir, et elle a donné l'exemple d'Obama, ceux qui sont au pouvoir trop souvent sont dans des institutions blanches où ils tendent à diminuer ou à effacer leur identité noire afin de perdurer, de persévérer. Et à cela, je m'y oppose, nous nous y opposons. Dans ce monde de suprématie blanche, de suprématie leucodermique, clair de peau, on est vu d'abord et avant tout comme noir, et ainsi on doit s'unir ensemble.
Okay, folks. Like, what's all Warren? Do you have anything else to say? Because I see you rub the hairs on your chin. Or anything you want to add before we close out?
Here's the thing. I think I've talked a lot. I'll say that. People.
Hold on a second, Warren. Everyone live. Warren always says, "Oh, I talk a lot of time," and he's trying to be so humble, but you bring it, Warren. So you don't have to apologize.
I do. I know. One of the things is, I watch my privilege. You know what I mean? As much as people see a Black man on screen, I'm privileged because I've accessed education. I have, I teach in the academic space, so I do have certain privileges. So I want to ensure that I'm watching my privilege when I speak at all times. That's number one. But this conversation taught me a lot. And I'm sure I've added value. But one of the things that I've learned is we gotta support. And Elle, I don't mean to just name drop you every so often in my discussion today, but you had mentioned something today that really hit home in terms of the work you've been doing, and you're brilliant. Your mind is beautiful. You know what I'm saying? You're a beautiful woman, but your mind is beautiful. And if we sit here and we just don't, we give the white supremacists a pass, we're not going to get folks like Elle who deserve a tenure track or deserve to be teaching in universities. People like Elle won't get there. You know what I'm saying? And I'm telling you, I see it all the time. I live it. I breathe it. I see it. And don't get me wrong, it's not all white people are bad. That's not where I'm coming from. There are even people, racialized people, who have that white settler ideology. Fanon talks about it all the time. And Black Student Right Mass, pick it up if you haven't picked it up.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We can work in a relation of solidarity with all people. However, we need to be strategic on how we address and appreciate Black lives. You know what I mean? When we talk about Black lives, we're not just talking about when the next police officer kills a Black person. We're talking about, sorry, Elle, I'm name dropping you again, but we're talking about Elle's life too. People don't even realize. You think this because you see a wall behind us, we good? You think because we have a laptop, we good? Economic help or support and appreciation, social support and appreciation. We need to look on a different level of different faucets. And we can't just be looking and chanting Black lives only when something tragic happens. We need to be chanting Black lives at all times in every space to ensure there's a complete liberation of our people.
Absolutely.
Right? There's people, there's young people looking at us. They're gonna want our direction. If we don't, I don't know who's in the audience. If we got any academic tenure track people, anybody who can put on work, you need to be looking at Elle Jones. And if you're not, why are you here? You know what I mean? If we're talking about Black solidarity, why are we seeing Elle Jones have something yet? Come on. We need to mobilize. We can do better, people. So I'm gonna leave people with that.
Well, thank you, my brother. I gotta say, thank you. But I think also when I'm my own best example, but we know that, this is a continuum, and like whatever I'm experiencing. I mean, I always say people don't value me because they don't value the people that I work with, right? They won't value me until they value prisoners and people who are being deported and, Black people facing state violence. It's because I talk about that I'm not valued. But of course, they're experiencing way more violations than I'm experiencing. At least I'm in a house people always think, you guys so good. You're in these jobs. Like, do you know what these jobs pay? But at least I have my freedom, right? So, thank you so much for your shouts of solidarity and just like backing me up. But I also just wanted to say that when I use myself as an example, I'm not trying to center myself into the struggle. I'm just saying that in some way, I'm saying if somebody, when I am educated and I am light skinned and I am, conventionally whatever, I'm not even a threatening looking Black person. And so if this is the white supremacy I experience, our darkest skinned brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters who don't speak English, our brothers and sisters with criminal records, our brothers and sisters who are Muslim and visibly Muslim and wear hijab, people living with mental illness, people with disabilities, like they're not even getting as close to the door as I'm able to get, right? And so I'm very privileged despite, what I get back from institutions. I can live and move around freely. I can pay my bills, like sometimes, but like I'm actually in freedom. And, so I just also don't, I don't want to make it sound like, I'm living this like tragic Black life. But thank you so much, Warren, for just being such a good comrade and brother to me and to all of you on the show.
And I apologize. I didn't mean to make it seem like we pour or anything. I'm
very great. I'm just, like I'm getting on my heart and being humble too, Warren. Let me be humble too.
Cesar?
Yes, if I can just quickly add, and
yes,
mostly I support absolutely what Warren just said in terms of Elle. We need to support each other. Part of supporting each other is just as us here with the Dr. Vibe show that basically, we got, pulled from some of our colleagues, the contacts and all that, and we work together to create something of quality and valuable for our people. One of the things that I will very quickly add, when I started giving conferences on racism and discriminations in high school, the very first one I remember, there is a young Black girl, maybe 13 or 14, she cried. I wasn't made aware of this until I'm going to say 6 to 9 months later. She cried and she basically explained that she had never thought, this is a 13 or 14-year-old in 2017. She never thought she would see a Black person, notably a big, dark-skinned Black man, muscular, coming to present on racism, dressed in African clothes, with his traditional hat on, and presenting with facts and videos and calling things as they were. It inspired her to notably, I think they told me something like once a week or every 2 weeks, to come to school wearing something traditional as she was going to a public school. We are carrying the torch of our heroes and our ancestors in showing the example for those who are younger than us. If I can take an example in the entertainment world, as entertainment is so spread in our community, Denzel Washington passed the torch to oh my God, why am I having a blank of memory? Black Panther. To Black Panther.
Chadwick Boseman.
Chadwick Boseman, there you go. From Denzel Washington to Chadwick Boseman, notably in terms of his academic studies in arts, in cinema, and in terms of his cinematic career, the roles that he played, but notably Wakanda, what it instilled in our people. Like I was saying in the June 5th Black Lives Matter protest in Ottawa, it must not just be a movie, it must become reality. It must be that place that when I go to give video conferences, but also conferences and trainings in person, I sometimes wear traditional outfits, I wear my traditional hat, and I speak a truthful and strong language in support of brothers as sisters, be there in whatever other second, third, fourth identity they are, so that each and every one of them, and we have to say this, we have a growing number of mixed, some people will say biracial people, will also need to feel confident in their Blackness. And when I'm saying mixed, let us not forget, we are in Canada, half Black and half Indigenous. I'm having indigenous agencies coming to me because they're having half black, half indigenous children will need someone to help guide their blackness, will help to empower them. We need to do this work all together. This is what Black solidarity and unity is. It comes down to the family unit, the community unit, and the fact that no matter where in the world there's a Black person who's standing, victim of racism or not, as Warren was saying, Black Lives Matter is not just when a white cop kills a Black person. It's every day, 365 days of the year on the four corners of the world. And my Pan-Africanism is anywhere in the universe there's a Black person who says I'm a victim of racism. I support you, my brother. I support you, my sister.
We're gonna end it right there. I don't think we need anything on top of that. That was all that and then some. I just get it off quickly here. Ask each one of the panelists where they can be contacted. Elle, the easiest, right?
You can email me l.jones, like my name, el.jones at msvu.ca, Mount St. Vincent University.ca. You can, Facebook's full.
Still, right?
Would have to buy my number.
All right, no problem. Warren, you're on mute. You'll get it right. You'll get it right, Warren. You're still on mute.
You're still on mute, brother.
There we go.
There we go. So you can reach me at well, you can reach me anywhere in Ottawa, like as long as you look for the Black Signal.
No,
I'm just joking.
in your local TV station in Ottawa, right?
Yeah. So no. You know, that's another conversation. Anyway, you can reach me at my email address, warrenclarke@cmail.carleton.ca, or just head to my website, warrenclarke.ca. I think that's the easiest one. Any which way that I can support or we can support, please know I think I can speak openly and freely by saying this. We look to do so. If we can't get the support for you, we'll get someone to support you. Right.
Fantastic. Cesar.
Thank you so much. I can be reached very easily. President at rootsandculturecanada.com, all in one word, rootsandculturecanada.com. Our CEO actually is in the comment, Ketia Peters.
Oh.
Email ceo@rootsandculturecanada.com. You find us in the media, you Google our name, you will see us, Cesar Ndema-Moussa, always here. And just before we finish, if I can give a quick shout out to one of our brothers here in Ottawa, Noel, I said it, he made a post regarding Black consciousness in politics, and we literally had a live display of Karen-ness, that whiteness attitude of such a Karen. And of course, as one was saying, the graduate, the throwing all the words, the studies in trying to explain to Black people about race and politics. My Black people, part of self-care is self-preservation. If you have to deal with such whites and other non-Blacks challenging your Blackness, you don't have to engage. You can exit. You have nothing to explain or to justify to them. But there are people like me who will go comment after comment, take the time, because we need to dismantle and to break these type of mindset and mentalities that too often hide their I'm not racist with a Black friend, a mixed child, a Black car or a Black dog, etc., etc. They're racist in the closet. And I'm telling you, I stand up to them.
Wonderful, folks. Fantastic. Epic conversation. Every time these three are on, they're just amplifying and raising the bar. Few quick things. I'd like to shout out everybody, but there's too many people to shout out, and I don't want to forget anyone. And as I always say, I would say I'd forget your name because it's my head, not my heart. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your support. For those who caught it live, for those who catch the replay, epic. We had people on both sides of the border giving epic comments. So we'll leave it as is. My name is Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And once a month, I host conversations for fathers that are co-sponsored by Dad Central, Canada's national fatherhood organization, and Dove Men Care. I always close out my conversations with this: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions. They aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. And in regards to Black solidarity, just a quick little thing from me. The word success has 3 S's in it. For me, the 3 S's are service, sacrifice, selflessness. And the panel that we have on Black Canada Talking once a month, they amplify that, in my opinion. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith. And thank you to BIA Media for an epic production. Goodbye, everybody. God bless.